6 months after the ambush that changed her life, Monica received the news she had been waiting for. The Silver Star recommendation had been approved at the highest levels of the military. She would become the first woman since World War II to receive the Silver Star for actions in direct combat. The ceremony would take place at Forward Operating Base Shank in front of her entire unit. Monica felt mixed emotions about receiving such a high military honor. She was proud of what she had accomplished and grateful for the recognition. But she also knew that the real reward for her actions was much simpler. 3 soldiers had gone home to their families because of what she had done in those critical 12 minutes. That was worth more than any medal. The day before the award ceremony, Monica received video messages from the 3 soldiers whose lives she had saved. Specialist Davis, who had suffered the head injury, recorded his message from his family's home in Michigan. He was back to normal and planning to return to duty. He told Monica that she would always be his hero and that his entire family considered her part of their family. Lieutenant Peterson sent his message from Germany, where he was completing his recovery from his leg injury. He was walking normally and expected to return to Afghanistan within 2 months. Peterson thanked Monica not just for saving his life, but for showing him what real courage looked like. He said that Monica had redefined his understanding of what it meant to be a soldier. Private Johnson's message was the most emotional. He recorded it from his hospital bed in the United States, where he was recovering from his final surgery to repair his internal injuries. Johnson's wife and 2 young children were with him in the video. His 4-year-old daughter, Sarah, looked directly at the camera and said, "Thank you for saving my daddy." Monica cried when she heard those words. Johnson himself could barely speak without crying. He told Monica that every day he woke up with his family was a gift that she had given him. He said that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of the sacrifice she had made for him. Johnson promised that his children would grow up knowing the name of the woman who had saved their father's life. The award ceremony took place on a clear morning in October 2007. Soldiers from throughout the region had gathered at FOB Shank to witness the historic event. General Morrison, the commanding general for all forces in Afghanistan, had flown in specifically to present Monica with the Silver Star. This was the highest-ranking officer that had ever visited the small forward operating base. Monica stood at attention in her dress uniform as General Morrison read the citation for her Silver Star. The words described her actions during the ambush in clinical military language, but they couldn't capture the terror, determination, and courage that Monica had felt during those 12 minutes. The citation mentioned that she had distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous conduct and action against an enemy of the United States. But General Morrison's personal remarks were more meaningful to Monica. He told the assembled soldiers that Monica represented everything that was best about the American military. She had demonstrated that courage was not about size or strength, but about character and determination. She had shown that the most important weapon a soldier could carry was the willingness to sacrifice for others. General Morrison also announced that Monica's story would be included in the curriculum for all combat medic training programs. Future medics would study her actions and learn from her example. Monica would inspire generations of military medical personnel to be brave, skilled, and dedicated to their mission of preserving life in combat situations. As General Morrison pinned the Silver Star on Monica's uniform, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She remembered the scared 17-year-old girl who had walked into a military recruitment office because her family couldn't afford college. She remembered the grueling training that had prepared her for combat. She remembered the moment when everything she had learned came together in 12 minutes of chaos and courage. After the ceremony, Monica was surrounded by fellow soldiers who wanted to congratulate her and shake her hand. Many of them told her that her story had inspired them to be better soldiers. Some of the younger medics said that they had joined the medical corps specifically because of what they had heard about Monica's heroism. Monica realized that her actions had created ripple effects that would continue for years. Monica's parents had flown to Germany to watch the ceremony via video link. They were incredibly proud of their daughter, but also relieved that she was still alive. Monica's mother told reporters that she had always known her daughter was special, but she had never imagined that Monica would become a war hero. Her father said that Monica represented the best of both her Filipino heritage and her American identity. 3 weeks after receiving the Silver Star, Monica's deployment in Afghanistan came to an end. She had served for 15 months in one of the most dangerous areas of the country. She had treated hundreds of patients and saved dozens of lives. She had participated in over 200 combat patrols and survived multiple enemy attacks. Most importantly, she had proven that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. The flight home from Afghanistan was bittersweet for Monica. She was excited to see her family and friends, but she was also leaving behind soldiers who had become like brothers and sisters to her. She was leaving behind a mission that had given her life meaning and purpose. She was also leaving behind a part of herself that had been forged in the heat of combat. When Monica's plane landed in the United States, she was greeted by her parents, dozens of reporters, and hundreds of supporters. The story of the small Filipino-American woman who had become a war hero had captured the imagination of the American public. Monica found herself suddenly famous in a way that made her uncomfortable. Over the following weeks, Monica was invited to appear on television shows, speak at military events, and meet with government officials. She used these opportunities to talk about the importance of military medicine and to honor the soldiers she had served with in Afghanistan. Monica was careful to emphasize that she was just one example of the thousands of brave men and women who were serving their country in difficult circumstances. Monica was assigned to a military hospital in Texas, where she could be close to her family while continuing her career as a combat medic. She worked with wounded soldiers who were recovering from injuries sustained in Iraq and Afghanistan. Many of these soldiers had heard about Monica's story and were honored to be treated by someone they considered a hero. But Monica's most important role was mentoring young medics who were preparing for deployment to combat zones. She taught them the technical skills they would need to save lives, but she also taught them about courage, determination, and the warrior spirit that combat medics needed to succeed. Monica's students knew that they were learning from someone who had proven herself under the ultimate test. A year after returning from Afghanistan, Monica received an invitation that surprised and honored her. She was asked to speak at the graduation ceremony for a new class of combat medics at Fort Sam Houston. This was the same base where Monica had trained years earlier as a nervous young woman who wasn't sure she had what it took to be a soldier. Standing at the podium in front of 200 newly graduated medics, Monica looked out at faces that reminded her of herself when she was starting her military career. She saw young men and women from all backgrounds who had chosen to dedicate themselves to saving lives in the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. She saw the future of military medicine. Monica told the graduating medics that being a combat medic was the hardest job in the military, but also the most important. She told them that they would face situations that would test every aspect of their training, courage, and character. She told them that the soldiers they would serve with would depend on them in the most critical moments of their lives. But Monica also told them something that she had learned during those 12 minutes in Afghanistan. She told them that when the moment came to choose between safety and duty, between fear and courage, between self-preservation and sacrifice, they would discover that they were stronger than they ever imagined. They would discover that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when someone else's life depended on their actions. Monica concluded her speech by reminding the new medics that they were joining a proud tradition of warriors who fought to preserve life rather than take it. She told them that the skills they had learned and the oath they had taken made them guardians of something precious and irreplaceable. She told them that they had the power to give families the greatest gift imaginable, the safe return of someone they loved. After the graduation ceremony, Monica met individually with several of the new medics who had questions about deployment and combat medicine. She was struck by how young they looked and how eager they were to serve. Monica remembered feeling the same mixture of excitement and nervousness when she was preparing for her first deployment. One young medic, Private Martinez from California, asked Monica if she had ever been afraid during combat. Monica told her that fear was natural and normal, but that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was doing the right thing despite being afraid. Monica said that the most courageous thing she had ever done was stepping out of that armored vehicle to help wounded soldiers, even though she was terrified. Another medic, Sergeant Thompson from Georgia, asked Monica what advice she would give to someone preparing for their first combat deployment. Monica told him to trust his training, trust his equipment, and trust his fellow soldiers. She told him that the skills he had learned would become automatic in crisis situations, and that his unit would watch out for him just as he would watch out for them. As Monica continued her career in the Army, she remained committed to the values that had guided her during those crucial 12 minutes in Afghanistan. She continued to train other medics, treat wounded soldiers, and serve as an example of what dedication and courage could accomplish. Monica never forgot that her job was to preserve life and give hope to people who were facing their darkest moments. Monica's story became part of military legend. The small woman from Texas who had become a one-woman army inspired countless other soldiers to find their own courage in difficult circumstances. Her example proved that heroism wasn't about being the biggest or strongest person in the room. It was about being the person who was willing to do whatever it took to protect others. Years later, Monica would reflect on how 12 minutes had changed not just her life, but the lives of everyone she touched. The 3 soldiers she saved went on to have families and careers that wouldn't have existed without her intervention. The medics she trained saved countless other lives. The example she set inspired a generation of military medical personnel to strive for excellence. Monica Lynn Brown had walked into that recruitment office as a teenager who wanted to help people. Through training, determination, and a moment of ultimate testing, she had become exactly what she set out to be. She had become a healer who was also a warrior. She had become living proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when someone else's life depended on their actions. She had become a legend in 12 minutes. But, more importantly, she had become exactly the person she was meant to be. The aftermath of the ambush felt surreal to Monica. The helicopters had disappeared into the Afghan sky, taking her wounded soldiers to safety. But the battlefield around her still smoked and stank of explosives. Spent ammunition casings littered the ground like deadly confetti. The destroyed lead vehicle continued to burn, sending a black column of smoke into the clear blue sky. Staff Sergeant Johnson approached Monica as she stood beside the MRAP, still holding her blood-stained medical bag. She could see something different in his eyes. Before the ambush, Johnson had looked at Monica as a competent medic and a good soldier. Now he was looking at her with something closer to awe. In 12 minutes, Monica had transformed from a young medic into a legend. Johnson told Monica that he had been watching her work during the firefight. He had seen her run through enemy fire to reach wounded soldiers. He had seen her treat multiple critical patients while bullets were hitting the vehicle around her. He had seen her kill enemy fighters to protect her patients. Johnson said that in his 15 years in the Army, he had never seen anything like what Monica had just done. The convoy spent 2 more hours at the ambush site, waiting for a recovery team to arrive and collect the destroyed equipment. During this time, Monica learned more about what had happened during those chaotic 12 minutes. The Taliban had positioned at least 8 fighters in the hills around the road. They had been planning the ambush for several days, waiting for the right convoy to come along. The intelligence officers who arrived with the recovery team explained that the Taliban had specifically targeted American convoys in this area because they knew that disabled vehicles would attract medical evacuation helicopters. The Taliban wanted to shoot down helicopters and create spectacular propaganda videos. But Monica's quick actions had prevented the ambush from becoming the disaster that the Taliban had planned. The recovery team also informed Monica that her accurate rifle fire had killed 2 Taliban fighters and wounded a third. This was unusual for any soldier, but especially remarkable for a combat medic whose primary job was saving lives, not taking them. Monica felt conflicted about this information. She was proud that she had protected her patients, but killing people, even enemy fighters, was not something she had ever wanted to do. On the drive back to Forward Operating Base Shank, Monica sat quietly and thought about what had happened. She had joined the Army to save lives and help people. In the space of 12 minutes, she had done both. She had saved the lives of 3 American soldiers who would have died without her intervention. But she had also taken the lives of 2 Taliban fighters who were trying to kill her patients. Monica realized that this was the reality of being a combat medic in a war zone. Sometimes, saving innocent lives required taking the lives of people who wanted to harm them. Monica had crossed a line that day, but it was a line that she had crossed willingly to protect soldiers who were counting on her. She had become a warrior in service of her calling as a healer. When the convoy arrived back at FOB Shank, Monica was surprised to find a crowd of soldiers waiting for them. Word had spread quickly about the ambush and Monica's heroic actions. Soldiers from other units had come to see the medic who had single-handedly saved 3 lives while fighting off a Taliban assault. Monica felt uncomfortable with the attention, but she understood that her fellow soldiers needed heroes. Captain Harrison pulled Monica aside for a private conversation. He told her that he was recommending her for the Silver Star, one of the highest military decorations for valor in combat. The Silver Star was rarely awarded to medics, and had never been awarded to a woman for actions in Iraq or Afghanistan. Monica would be making history if the recommendation was approved. Monica asked Captain Harrison if the wounded soldiers were going to be okay. He told her that all 3 men were stable and receiving excellent care at the military hospital in Germany. Davis, the soldier with the head injury, was expected to make a full recovery. Peterson would need surgery to repair his leg, but would return to duty within 6 months. Johnson, the most seriously wounded, would need multiple surgeries but was expected to survive. That night, Monica called her parents from the communications center at FOB Shank. She couldn't tell them specific details about what had happened because of operational security, but she wanted to hear their voices. Her mother could tell that something had changed in Monica's voice. She asked if Monica was okay. Monica told her mother that she was fine, and that she was finally becoming the person she was meant to be. Over the next few days, Monica tried to return to her normal routine. She treated routine injuries and illnesses at the base medical clinic. She went on regular patrols with her unit. She wrote letters to friends back home. But everyone at FOB Shank was treating her differently. Soldiers who barely knew her name before were now calling her a hero. Monica found the attention overwhelming. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the senior medic at FOB Shank, understood what Monica was going through. He had been decorated for valor early in his career and remembered how difficult it was to deal with sudden fame. Rodriguez told Monica that being a hero wasn't about seeking attention or praise. It was about doing the right thing when everything was going wrong. Rodriguez also explained that Monica's actions during the ambush would inspire other soldiers for years to come. Young medics would hear her story during training and understand that their job was about more than treating injuries. They would learn that combat medics were warriors who fought to preserve life in the face of death. Monica was becoming a symbol of everything that was best about military medicine. A week after the ambush, Monica received word that all 3 of the soldiers she had treated were continuing to recover well. Davis had been transferred to a military hospital in the United States and was expected to return to duty within 3 months. Peterson was walking with crutches and would be back with his unit within 6 weeks. Johnson had undergone successful surgery to repair his internal injuries and was out of immediate danger. Monica also learned that the families of the wounded soldiers had specifically asked to thank her for saving their loved ones. Johnson's wife had written a letter describing how grateful she was that her husband would be coming home to see their children grow up. Davis's parents had sent a package of cookies with a note saying that Monica would always be considered part of their family. These personal messages meant more to Monica than any military decoration ever could. She had become a soldier to help people, and these letters proved that her actions had made a real difference in real people's lives. Monica kept the letters in her footlocker and read them whenever she was feeling homesick or discouraged. 2 weeks after the ambush, Monica's unit was assigned to a new area of operations. They would be working with Afghan National Army soldiers to clear Taliban fighters from a strategic valley. This would be more dangerous than routine patrols, but Monica felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The ambush had taught her that she was capable of handling anything. The new mission involved establishing a temporary base in the valley and conducting daily patrols to locate and engage Taliban fighters. Monica would be the only medic for a combined force of American and Afghan soldiers. This was a significant responsibility, but everyone who had heard about her actions during the ambush was confident that she could handle it. On their first patrol in the new area, Monica noticed that the Afghan soldiers were looking at her with curiosity and respect. They had heard about the American female medic who had killed Taliban fighters while saving wounded soldiers. In Afghan culture, this kind of courage was deeply respected, regardless of gender. Monica was earning the trust of soldiers who would be fighting alongside her. The patrols in the valley were more intense than anything Monica had experienced before. The terrain was mountainous and provided many hiding places for Taliban fighters. The enemy used hit-and-run tactics, attacking from ambush positions and then disappearing into the rocky landscape. Monica had to be ready for casualties at any moment. During their third week in the valley, Monica's unit was attacked while crossing a river. Taliban fighters opened fire from caves in the cliffs above, and several soldiers were hit before they could reach cover. Monica found herself once again running through enemy fire to reach wounded soldiers. But this time, she felt calm and focused. She knew exactly what to do. Monica treated 2 American soldiers and 1 Afghan soldier during the firefight. All 3 had serious gunshot wounds, but Monica's quick action and expert medical care kept them alive until medical evacuation helicopters could arrive. Word of her second heroic performance spread quickly through the military community in Afghanistan. Colonel Matthews, the regional commander, flew to the valley specifically to meet Monica. He told her that her actions were becoming legendary among soldiers throughout Afghanistan. She was proving that American military medicine was the best in the world, and that individual courage could make the difference between life and death in combat situations. Monica was starting to understand that she had become something larger than herself. She wasn't just Staff Sergeant Monica Lynn Brown anymore. She was a symbol of courage, skill, and dedication that inspired other soldiers to be their best. This was a heavy responsibility, but it was also an honor that she was determined to live up to. As Monica's deployment continued, she continued to save lives and inspire others. She treated dozens of wounded soldiers and civilians. She participated in dangerous missions to clear Taliban strongholds. She mentored younger medics who looked up to her as a role model. Most importantly, she never forgot why she had become a soldier in the first place. Monica's parents continued to worry about her, especially after they learned from news reports that their daughter was involved in heavy fighting in Afghanistan. But they were also proud of what she had accomplished. Their daughter had found her calling and was making a difference in the world. She was saving lives and showing everyone what true courage looked like. The Silver Star recommendation was working its way through military headquarters, but Monica tried not to think about it too much. Awards and decorations were nice, but they weren't why she did her job. Monica did her job because wounded soldiers needed someone to fight for their lives when they couldn't fight for themselves. She did her job because she had promised to be a healer, and sometimes healing required fighting. As Monica prepared for another patrol in the dangerous valley, she thought about how much she had changed since arriving in Afghanistan. She was still the same person who had grown up in Texas and wanted to help people. But she had also become something more. She had become a warrior who used her weapons in service of life rather than death. She had become a legend in 12 minutes, and she was still writing her story. Inside the MRAP, Monica found herself in a nightmare scenario that no amount of training could fully prepare someone for. Lieutenant Peterson was conscious, but pale from blood loss. His left leg had been mangled by shrapnel from the roadside bomb, and bone was visible through torn flesh and fabric. Private Johnson was in worse shape. The blast had sent metal fragments into his abdomen, and Monica could tell from his symptoms that he was bleeding internally. Monica quickly triaged the wounded soldiers. Specialist Davis, whom she had just dragged to safety, was the most critical. His head injury could be fatal if not treated immediately. Private Johnson was second priority because of his internal bleeding. Lieutenant Peterson, despite his painful leg wound, was stable for the moment. Monica would have to work fast and efficiently to keep all 3 men alive. The Taliban fighters continued their assault from the surrounding hills. Monica could hear the distinctive crack of bullets striking the armor plating of the MRAP. Her fellow soldiers were returning fire with everything they had. Machine guns chattered from the remaining vehicles. The radio crackled with urgent calls for medical evacuation helicopters and air support. But Monica knew that help would not arrive quickly enough to save the wounded men without immediate medical intervention. Monica started with Davis because head injuries were the most time-sensitive. She carefully examined his skull and found a depressed fracture where a piece of metal had struck him. Blood was seeping from his ears, indicating possible brain damage. Monica cleaned the wound and applied pressure bandages to stop the external bleeding. She gave him medication to reduce brain swelling and monitored his breathing carefully. While treating Davis, Monica kept one eye on Private Johnson. His abdominal wound was not bleeding much externally, but his vital signs indicated that he was losing blood internally. His pulse was rapid and weak. His skin was becoming cold and clammy. Monica knew that Johnson would go into shock within minutes if she couldn't stabilize him. Monica quickly moved to Johnson and began cutting away his uniform to examine the wound. She found 2 entry points where shrapnel had penetrated his abdomen. One piece had struck his liver, and another had damaged his intestines. Monica applied pressure bandages to the external wounds, but she knew that the real damage was happening inside, where she couldn't reach it. She started 2 large-bore 4 lines in Johnson's arms and began pushing fluids and blood products to replace what he was losing internally. She gave him morphine for pain and monitored his blood pressure constantly. Johnson was conscious, but scared. He kept asking Monica if he was going to die. Monica looked him in the eye and promised him that she would not let that happen. Lieutenant Peterson's leg wound was painful, but not immediately life-threatening. Monica quickly examined the injury and determined that the main arteries and bones were intact. She cleaned the wound, applied antibiotic powder, and wrapped it with pressure bandages. She gave Peterson morphine for pain and told him to keep pressure on the wound. As Monica worked on the wounded soldiers, the firefight continued around them. She could hear Staff Sergeant Johnson coordinating the defense from her original Humvee. Specialist Thompson, who had been knocked unconscious earlier, was now manning a machine gun and laying down suppressive fire. The Taliban fighters were determined and well-positioned, but the American soldiers were fighting back with everything they had. Monica realized that she needed additional medical supplies to keep the wounded men alive until help arrived. Her medical bag was running low on 4 fluids and blood products. There were more supplies in the destroyed lead vehicle, but getting to them would require running through open ground under enemy fire. Monica knew it was dangerous, but she also knew it was the only chance her patients had. She told Lieutenant Peterson that she had to leave temporarily to get more medical supplies. Peterson tried to talk her out of it, saying it was too dangerous. But Monica had already made up her mind. She checked her rifle, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the MRAP into the chaos of the ongoing firefight. The distance to the destroyed Humvee was only about 40 yards, but it felt like a mile under enemy fire. Monica ran in short bursts, taking cover behind rocks and vehicle parts scattered by the explosion. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet and ricocheted off metal debris. She could hear her fellow soldiers providing covering fire, but the Taliban fighters kept shooting at her exposed position. Monica reached the destroyed vehicle and quickly searched for medical supplies. The explosion had scattered gear throughout the wreckage, but she managed to find 2 bags of 4 fluid, several units of blood products, and additional morphine. She stuffed everything into her medical bag and prepared for the dangerous run back to the wounded soldiers. As Monica prepared to leave the cover of the destroyed vehicle, she noticed movement in the hills to her left. A Taliban fighter was positioning himself for a clear shot at the MRAP where her wounded soldiers were waiting. Monica realized that if she didn't act immediately, the fighter would be able to shoot directly into the vehicle where Davis, Johnson, and Peterson lay helpless. Monica made a split-second decision that would change her life forever. Instead of running directly back to the MRAP, she moved to a position where she could engage the Taliban fighter. Monica had qualified as an expert marksman during training, but she had never shot at a human being before. Her hands were shaking from adrenaline, and her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the gunfire. The Taliban fighter was about 150 yards away, partially concealed behind a rock formation. Monica took a prone position behind a piece of twisted metal from the destroyed vehicle. She controlled her breathing and focused on her target. The fighter was raising his rifle to aim at the MRAP. Monica had only seconds to act. Monica squeezed the trigger smoothly, just as she had been taught. Her rifle cracked once, and the Taliban fighter dropped behind his cover. Monica couldn't tell if she had hit him or if he was just taking cover. But she had bought her wounded soldiers some time. She immediately began moving toward the MRAP, expecting return fire from the fighter's position. But instead of return fire, Monica heard shouting in Dari, the local language. The Taliban fighters seemed to be repositioning themselves for a new attack. Monica realized that her accurate shooting had probably forced them to respect her skills and adjust their tactics. She used this opportunity to sprint the remaining distance to the MRAP. Monica dove through the rear door of the MRAP and immediately went back to work on her patients. Davis was still unconscious, but stable. His breathing was regular, and the bleeding from his head wound had slowed. Peterson was alert and maintaining pressure on his leg wound. But Johnson was getting worse. His blood pressure was dropping, and his skin was becoming cold and gray. Monica quickly started a third four-line in Johnson and began pushing blood products as fast as possible. She gave him additional medications to support his blood pressure and heart rate. Johnson was drifting in and out of consciousness, and Monica could see that he was fighting for his life. She kept talking to him, telling him to stay with her, and reminding him about his family back home. Johnson had talked about his wife and two young children many times during their deployment. His daughter was 4 years old and had just learned to ride a bicycle. His son was 18 months old and had taken his first steps while Johnson was in Afghanistan. Monica used these details to keep Johnson focused and fighting for his life. Outside, the firefight was intensifying. Monica could hear helicopters approaching in the distance, but she couldn't tell if they were medical evacuation aircraft or attack helicopters coming to provide air support. Either way, help was getting closer. Monica just had to keep her patients alive a little longer. Suddenly, the Taliban fighters launched a coordinated assault on the convoy. Monica could hear running footsteps and shouting voices getting closer to their position. The enemy fighters were trying to overrun the disabled vehicles before American reinforcements could arrive. Monica realized that she might have to defend her wounded soldiers with her rifle while continuing to provide medical care. Monica positioned herself near the rear door of the MRAP where she could see outside and return fire if necessary. She kept one hand on Johnson's four-line and held her rifle with the other. Lieutenant Peterson, despite his wound, had also readied his weapon. Even wounded soldiers could fight if they had to. The first Taliban fighter appeared from behind a rock formation about 50 yards away. Monica could see him clearly through the rear door of the MRAP. He was young, probably no older than herself, and carrying an AK-47 rifle. For a moment, their eyes met across the battlefield. Then, the fighter raised his rifle toward the vehicle where Monica was treating wounded soldiers. Monica didn't hesitate. She had already crossed the line from healer to warrior once during this firefight. This time, her rifle shot was even more accurate. The Taliban fighter fell immediately. Monica had killed a human being to protect her patients. In that moment, she understood that being a combat medic sometimes meant taking life to save life. More Taliban fighters appeared from different positions, but now Monica's fellow soldiers were ready for them. Machine gun fire from the remaining vehicles cut down several attackers before they could get close. The Taliban fighters who survived began retreating back into the hills. Their assault had failed, and American air support was getting closer. Monica heard the distinctive sound of Apache attack helicopters approaching from the south. The heavily armed aircraft would make short work of any remaining Taliban fighters. She also heard the radio chatter indicating that medical evacuation helicopters were only minutes away. Help was coming, but Monica wasn't finished yet. She turned her attention back to her patients. Davis was showing signs of improvement. His pupils were responding to light, and his vital signs were stable. Peterson's leg wound was painful but not life-threatening. But Johnson was still critical. Despite all of Monica's efforts, he was losing the battle against internal bleeding. Monica made a decision that went beyond her training and experience. Johnson needed surgery to repair his internal injuries, but the medical evacuation helicopter wouldn't arrive for several more minutes. Monica couldn't perform surgery in the back of an armored vehicle, but She could try a dangerous procedure to buy Johnson more time. She decided to insert a large bore needle directly into Johnson's abdomen to drain blood that was pooling internally and compressing his organs. This was an advanced procedure that was normally done by surgeons in operating rooms, not by combat medics in the middle of firefights. If Monica made a mistake, she could kill Johnson instantly. Monica sterilized the needle with alcohol and carefully located the insertion point on Johnson's abdomen. She could feel his pulse getting weaker and knew that he was running out of time. She took a deep breath, said a prayer, and inserted the needle slowly and carefully into Johnson's abdominal cavity. Dark blood immediately began flowing through the needle. Monica had successfully located the internal bleeding and was draining the blood that was compressing Johnson's organs. His blood pressure began to improve almost immediately. His skin started to regain some color. Monica had quite literally brought Johnson back from the edge of death. The medical evacuation helicopter landed about 5 minutes later. The crew consisted of a flight medic, a crew chief, and 2 pilots. They quickly assessed the wounded soldiers and prepared them for transport to the military hospital at Bagram Air Base. Monica gave them a detailed report on each patient's injuries and the treatment she had provided. As the wounded soldiers were loaded onto the helicopter, each one thanked Monica for saving their lives. Davis, who had regained consciousness, told her that he remembered her voice calling to him during the darkness. Peterson thanked her for her courage under fire. Johnson, who was now stable, told her that she was the reason he would see his children again. The helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the afternoon sky, carrying Monica's patients to safety. She stood in the dust and smoke of the battlefield, covered in blood and exhausted from the most intense 12 minutes of her life. Monica Lynn Brown had become something she never expected to be. She had become a warrior. The morning of April 25, 2007, started like any other day at Forward Operating Base Shank. Monica woke up at 0500 hours to the sound of her alarm clock. She pulled on her uniform and boots, then walked to the medical clinic to check on the overnight patients. There was a soldier with food poisoning and another with a sprained ankle from a basketball game. Nothing serious. Nothing that suggested this day would be different from any other. After breakfast, Monica attended the morning briefing with the rest of her unit. Captain Harrison, their commanding officer, explained that they would be conducting a routine patrol to the village of Yani Kale. Intelligence reports suggested that Taliban fighters had been seen in the area, but it was the kind of report they received almost every day. The patrol would leave at 1000 hours and return by 1600 hours. Monica gathered her gear methodically. She checked her medical bag twice, making sure she had enough bandages, morphine, and for fluids. She inspected her rifle and ammunition. She put on her body armor and helmet. The gear weighed over 60 pounds, but Monica had worn it so many times that it felt like a second skin. She was ready for another routine patrol. The convoy consisted of 4 vehicles, 2 armored Humvees, 1 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle called an MRAP, and 1 truck carrying supplies. Monica rode in the second Humvee with her squad leader, Staff Sergeant Johnson, and 3 other soldiers. Private Martinez drove, while Specialist Thompson manned the machine gun on top. Private First Class Williams sat across from Monica, nervous about his first patrol outside the base. Williams was 19 years old and had arrived in Afghanistan only 2 weeks earlier. He came from a small town in Ohio where the most dangerous thing that happened was teenagers driving too fast on country roads. Now he was in a war zone, carrying a rifle and trying not to think about the roadside bombs that could kill him at any moment. Monica could see the fear in his eyes. As they drove through the gate of FOB Shank, Monica looked at the landscape around them. The road was dusty and rutted, bordered by fields where local farmers grew wheat and corn. Children often came out to wave at the American soldiers, hoping to get candy or bottled water. Today, the road seemed quieter than usual. Monica noticed that there were no children visible, and even the farmers seemed to have disappeared from their fields. Staff Sergeant Johnson noticed it too. He got on the radio and told the other vehicles to stay alert. When local civilians disappeared, it usually meant they knew something was about to happen. Johnson had been in Afghanistan for 10 months and had learned to trust his instincts. His instincts were telling him that something was wrong. The convoy continued toward Yani Kale, moving at about 20 miles per hour. This was fast enough to make them a harder target for snipers, but slow enough to watch for roadside bombs. Monica looked out the armored window at the passing scenery. She saw mud brick houses with flat roofs, small shops with metal doors, and goats wandering along the roadside. Everything looked normal, but the absence of people made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Private Williams was sweating despite the air conditioning in the Humvee. He kept checking his rifle and looking around nervously. Monica reached over and tapped him on the knee. She told him to take deep breaths and remember his training. She reminded him that they were all looking out for each other. Williams nodded and tried to relax, but Monica could see that he was still terrified. They were about halfway to Yani Kale when the radio crackled with a message from the lead vehicle. Sergeant Rodriguez, who was in charge of the convoy, reported that he could see the village ahead. Everything looked quiet. No sign of Taliban fighters. No obvious threats. The convoy would proceed to the village center, conduct their patrol, and then return to base. As they entered the outskirts of Yani Kale, Monica saw a few people on the streets. An old man sitting in front of a tea shop. A woman carrying water jugs. Some teenagers kicking a soccer ball in a vacant lot. But there were still far fewer people than usual. Monica had been on enough patrols to know that this was not normal. Something was definitely wrong. The convoy stopped in the village center, a small square surrounded by shops and houses. The soldiers got out of their vehicles and began their patrol. They would spend about an hour talking to local leaders, gathering information, and showing their presence in the area. Monica stayed with the vehicles, ready to provide medical support if needed. The village elder, a man named Mahmoud, came out to speak with Captain Harrison. Mahmoud was polite, but seemed nervous. He answered the captain's questions about Taliban activity, but his answers were vague and unhelpful. Monica watched the interaction from her position next to the Humvee. She noticed that Mahmoud kept looking around as if he was afraid someone was watching him. After about 45 minutes, Captain Harrison decided that they had gathered enough information. The patrol had been routine, with no signs of immediate danger. The soldiers loaded back into their vehicles and prepared to return to FOB Shank. Monica felt relieved. Another successful patrol with no casualties. The convoy left Yani Kale and began the journey back to base. Monica relaxed slightly, thinking about the hot shower and hot meal waiting for her. Private Williams seemed more relaxed too. He even made a joke about the terrible music that Specialist Thompson was playing on his iPod. For a moment, everything felt normal. They had been driving for about 10 minutes when Monica heard Staff Sergeant Johnson talking urgently into the radio. He was reporting that the lead vehicle had spotted something suspicious on the road ahead. It looked like a pile of rocks and dirt that hadn't been there on the way to the village. This was a classic sign of a roadside bomb. The convoy stopped immediately. Sergeant Rodriguez called for an explosive ordnance disposal team to come and investigate the suspicious object. In the meantime, all the soldiers would have to wait in their vehicles. This was standard procedure, but it also made them sitting ducks if the Taliban had planned an ambush. Monica felt her heart rate increase. She checked her medical bag one more time and made sure her rifle was ready. She looked at the other soldiers in her vehicle. Staff Sergeant Johnson was calm and professional, but she could see the tension in his jaw. Private Martinez kept scanning the surrounding area through his window. Specialist Thompson was still in the gun turret, but he had stopped joking around. Private Williams looked like he was about to throw up. They waited for 20 minutes. The road was completely empty except for their convoy. No other vehicles. No pedestrians. No farmers in the fields. The silence was unnerving. Monica knew that the Taliban often used fake roadside bombs to stop convoys, then attacked from hidden positions while the soldiers were stationary. Finally, the explosive ordnance disposal team arrived in an armored vehicle. 2 soldiers got out wearing heavy bomb suits and began walking toward the suspicious object. The rest of the convoy watched and waited. Monica said a silent prayer that it would turn out to be nothing more than a pile of rocks. The bomb disposal experts examined the suspicious object for about 10 minutes. Then, one of them waved to the convoy and gave a thumbs-up signal. It was just rocks and dirt, not a bomb. The convoy could proceed. Monica felt a wave of relief wash over her. They would be back at base within the hour. As the convoy began moving again, Monica noticed movement in the hills to their right. It looked like people running between the rocks and scrub brush. She reported what she saw to Staff Sergeant Johnson, who immediately got on the radio. But before he could finish his transmission, the world exploded around them. The roadside bomb that hit their convoy was much larger than the fake one they had investigated. It had been buried in the road's surface and triggered remotely when the lead vehicle passed over it. The explosion threw the lead Humvee into the air and flipped it over. The blast wave shattered windows in the other vehicles and knocked Monica unconscious for several seconds. When Monica came to, her ears were ringing and there was blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. The inside of her Humvee was filled with dust and smoke. She could hear shouting and gunfire outside. Staff Sergeant Johnson was trying to get on the radio, but their communications equipment had been damaged by the blast. Monica looked around and did a quick assessment of her fellow soldiers. Private Martinez was conscious but holding his arm, which was clearly broken. Specialist Thompson had been thrown from the gun turret and was lying motionless on the floor of the vehicle. Staff Sergeant Johnson seemed to be okay except for some cuts from broken glass. Private Williams was conscious but in shock, staring straight ahead and not responding to questions. Outside, Monica could hear the distinctive sound of AK-47 rifles firing at their position. The Taliban had used the roadside bomb to disable the convoy, and now they were attacking from multiple directions. This was exactly the kind of complex ambush that Monica had trained for, but training never really prepared you for the reality of being shot at by people who wanted to kill you. Staff Sergeant Johnson managed to establish radio contact with the other vehicles in the convoy. The situation was bad. The lead vehicle had been completely destroyed by the roadside bomb. The MRAP was still operational but had several wounded soldiers inside. The supply truck was taking heavy fire and the driver had been hit. Monica realized that she was about to face the biggest challenge of her life. She grabbed her medical bag and told Staff Sergeant Johnson that she needed to get to the wounded soldiers in the other vehicles. Johnson said it was too dangerous. The Taliban fighters were shooting from hidden positions in the hills, and anyone who left the protection of the armored vehicles would be exposed. Monica understood the risk, but she also knew that wounded soldiers would die if they didn't receive immediate medical attention. As Monica prepared to leave the relative safety of her Humvee, she thought about her training and her promise to save lives. She thought about her parents back in Texas, who were probably watching the evening news and hoping their daughter was safe. She thought about the crucifix in her pocket and said a quick prayer. Then, she opened the door and stepped into hell. The sound of bullets hitting metal and dirt was unlike anything Monica had experienced in training. The Taliban fighters were well-positioned and had good fields of fire on the disabled convoy. Monica could see muzzle flashes coming from at least 3 different locations in the hills. She also realized that the attack had been carefully planned. The fake roadside bomb had stopped the convoy in exactly the right location for the ambush. Monica ran in a low crouch toward the destroyed lead vehicle. The Humvee had been flipped completely over and was burning. She could see that the gunner, Specialist Davis, had been thrown clear of the vehicle and was lying motionless about 20 feet away. Monica reached him first and quickly checked for signs of life. Davis was unconscious but breathing. He had a severe head injury and was bleeding heavily. As Monica worked on Davis, bullets continued to crack over her head. She could hear her fellow soldiers returning fire, but the Taliban fighters were well concealed and difficult to target. Monica applied pressure to Davis's head wound and started in 4-line to replace the blood he was losing. She gave him morphine for the pain and then prepared to move him to a safer position. Moving a severely injured soldier while under enemy fire was one of the most difficult tasks a combat medic could face. Monica was small, and Davis weighed over 200 pounds. She would have to drag him at least 50 feet to reach cover behind one of the other vehicles. But Monica had trained for this exact scenario, and she was determined not to let Davis die. Monica grabbed Davis under his arms and began dragging him toward the MRAP. Every few seconds, she had to drop down as bullets flew over their heads. The distance that normally would take 30 seconds to cover took nearly 5 minutes. By the time she got Davis to safety, Monica was exhausted and covered in his blood. But Davis was still alive, and that was what mattered. The MRAP provided better protection, but Monica discovered that there were more wounded soldiers inside. The vehicle's commander, Lieutenant Peterson, had been hit in the leg by shrapnel from the roadside bomb. Private Johnson had a serious abdominal wound that was bleeding internally. Both men needed immediate medical attention, and Monica was the only medic available to help them. Monica Lynn Brown never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to help people get better. Growing up in Lake Jackson, Texas, she was the kind of kid who brought home injured birds and tried to fix them with bandages from her mother's first aid kit. Her parents, Filipino immigrants who worked double shifts to give their daughter a better life, taught her that helping others was the most important thing a person could do. When Monica was 17, she watched her grandfather struggle with his health. She sat by his hospital bed for weeks, watching the nurses and doctors work. That's when she knew what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to be a healer. But Monica had another problem. Her family couldn't afford to send her to medical school. The bills were piling up, and her parents were getting older. One day, Monica saw a commercial on television. A young soldier was helping wounded people in a field hospital. The narrator talked about how the Army could train you to be a medic and pay for your education too. Monica knew this was her answer. She could serve her country, learn to save lives, and help her family at the same time. Her parents weren't happy when Monica told them she wanted to join the Army. Her mother cried for 3 days. Her father didn't speak to her for a week. They had come to America so their daughter wouldn't have to fight in wars. But Monica's mind was made up. She was going to become an Army medic. The recruitment office was in a strip mall between a donut shop and a cell phone store. Monica walked in wearing her best dress and carrying a folder with all her school papers. The recruiter, Sergeant Martinez, was a big man with kind eyes and scars on his hands. He looked at Monica's small frame and asked if she was sure she wanted to be a soldier. Monica told him she didn't want to be just any soldier. She wanted to save lives. She wanted to be a medic. Sergeant Martinez explained that being a combat medic was one of the hardest jobs in the military. Medics had to run toward danger when everyone else was running away. They had to stay calm when everything around them was chaos. They had to be strong enough to carry wounded soldiers who were twice their size. Monica listened to everything he said. Then, she looked him straight in the eye and said she was ready. Sergeant Martinez smiled and handed her the papers. 3 months later, Monica Lynn Brown was on a bus to Fort Sam Houston for basic training. Basic training was the hardest thing Monica had ever done. Every morning, she woke up at 5 o'clock to the sound of drill sergeants yelling. She ran miles in the Texas heat while carrying heavy packs. She crawled through mud under barbed wire. She learned to shoot rifles and throw grenades. But the hardest part wasn't the physical training. It was proving to everyone else that she belonged there. Some of the male recruits didn't think a small Filipino woman could be a real soldier. They whispered behind her back that she would quit before graduation. They said she was too weak to carry wounded soldiers. They said she would panic when the shooting started. Monica heard every word. But instead of getting angry, she worked harder. During weapons training, Monica scored higher than most of the men. During the combat exercises, she was always the first to reach wounded soldiers during simulations. When they did team-building challenges, Monica never gave up, even when her muscles were screaming and her lungs were burning. Slowly, the other recruits started to respect her. By the end of basic training, the same men who had doubted her were calling her Doc with genuine admiration. After basic training came advanced individual training for combat medics. This was where Monica learned the real skills she would need to save lives. She studied anatomy and physiology until she could identify every bone and muscle in the human body. She learned to start 4 lines in moving vehicles. She practiced treating gunshot wounds and blast injuries using realistic mannequins that bled fake blood. The instructors pushed the students hard. They created scenarios where everything went wrong at once. Multiple casualties, limited supplies, enemy fire, communications down. In these moments, Monica discovered something about herself. When things got chaotic, she got calmer. When everyone else was panicking, her mind became crystal clear. She could prioritize which patient to treat first. She could work efficiently even when her hands were shaking from adrenaline. One of her instructors, Sergeant First Class Williams, pulled Monica aside after a particularly intense training exercise. He told her that in his 15 years of training medics, he had never seen someone with her combination of technical skill and natural instinct. He said she was going to save a lot of lives. Monica felt proud, but she also felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. During her final weeks of training, Monica received her orders. She was being assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division and would deploy to Afghanistan within 6 months. Afghanistan was one of the most dangerous places in the world for American soldiers. The Taliban used improvised explosive devices, ambushes, and suicide bombers to attack convoys and patrols. Medics were especially valuable targets because killing a medic meant that other wounded soldiers might die too. Monica spent her leave time at home with her family. Her parents were proud of her now, but they were also terrified. Every night, they watched the news together, seeing reports of soldiers killed and wounded in Afghanistan. Monica's mother made her promise to be careful. Her father gave her a small crucifix that had belonged to his own father. Monica promised them she would come home safe. 2 weeks before deployment, Monica's unit did final training exercises at a base in Louisiana. They practiced convoy operations, medical evacuations, and responding to attacks. The exercises were designed to be as realistic as possible. They used real explosions and live ammunition firing overhead. The goal was to get soldiers used to the sounds and chaos of real combat. During one exercise, Monica's convoy was attacked by role players dressed as insurgents. The lead vehicle hit a fake roadside bomb. Multiple soldiers were wounded and needed immediate medical attention. Monica ran toward the damaged vehicle while instructors fired blank rounds over her head and set off smoke grenades to simulate the confusion of real combat. As Monica worked on the wounded soldiers, she realized that all her training had led to this moment. Her hands moved automatically, checking for injuries and applying pressure to bleeding wounds. Her voice was steady as she called for a medical evacuation helicopter. Even with explosions going off around her and instructors yelling orders, she felt completely focused. After the exercise, Monica's squad leader, Staff Sergeant Johnson, told her that he had never seen a new medic perform so well under pressure. He said she was ready for Afghanistan. That night, Monica called her parents and told them she was ready too. She meant it. The flight to Afghanistan took 26 hours with stops in Germany and Kuwait. Monica sat between 2 infantry soldiers who were on their second deployments. They told her stories about their previous tours, about the friends they had lost, and the people they had saved. They warned her that nothing could really prepare her for the real thing. But they also told her that good medics were the most respected people in the unit. When the plane landed at Bagram Air Base, Monica felt the dry heat of Afghanistan hit her face like a wall. The air smelled like dust and diesel fuel. In the distance, she could see mountains rising up against a pale sky. This was going to be her home for the next 15 months. This was where she would find out what kind of person she really was. Monica's unit was assigned to Forward Operating Base Shank in Logar Province. The base was surrounded by concrete walls topped with razor wire. Guard towers stood at each corner, manned by soldiers with machine guns. Inside the walls, the base looked like a small town made of shipping containers and temporary buildings. There was a dining facility, a medical clinic, a communications center, and rows of housing units where the soldiers slept. The medical clinic was where Monica would spend most of her time when she wasn't out on patrols. It was a simple building with white walls and fluorescent lights. There were 8 beds for patients, a small pharmacy, and an operating room for emergency surgeries. The head medic, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, had been in Afghanistan for 8 months. He had tired eyes and gentle hands, and he taught Monica the reality of combat medicine. Rodriguez explained that being a combat medic in Afghanistan meant dealing with injuries unlike anything they had trained for. Roadside bombs created blast injuries that could damage internal organs without leaving visible wounds. Gunshot wounds often got infected because of the dirty environment. Heat injuries were common because soldiers carried heavy gear in temperatures over 100 degrees. But Rodriguez also told Monica about the good parts of the job. He told her about the soldier whose life she saved who would go home to his wife and new baby. He told her about the local Afghan children who came to the base for medical care and how their smiles made all the danger worthwhile. He told her that being a combat medic was the hardest job in the world, but also the most important. Monica's first weeks at FOB Shank were quiet. She treated minor injuries and illnesses. She helped with routine medical care for the soldiers on the base. She learned the names and faces of everyone in her unit. She also studied the area around the base, learning which roads were safe and which ones were known for roadside bombs. The soldiers in Monica's unit came from all over America. There was Private Martinez from Los Angeles, who wanted to be a police officer after the Army. There was Specialist Thompson from rural Iowa, who missed his family's farm. There was Sergeant Williams from Detroit, who had joined the Army to pay for college. They were all different, but they shared one thing in common. They looked out for each other. As the weeks passed, Monica started going out on patrols with her unit. These patrols were designed to show the American presence in the area and to gather intelligence about Taliban activities. The patrols usually lasted 4 to 6 hours and covered 10 to 15 miles of dangerous terrain. Monica carried her medical bag along with her rifle and body armor. The total weight was over 60 pounds, but she never complained. During these patrols, Monica saw Afghanistan up close. She saw villages where children played in the streets despite the constant threat of violence. She saw farmers working in fields that might be mined with explosives. She saw the beauty of the landscape and the poverty of the people. She also saw how the local Afghans looked at the American soldiers. Some were grateful for their protection. Others were suspicious or afraid. 1 month into her deployment, Monica treated her first combat casualty. A soldier from another unit stepped on a pressure plate bomb while on patrol near the base. The explosion destroyed his leg and caused severe internal bleeding. Monica worked on him in the back of an armored vehicle while they raced back to the base. She managed to stop the bleeding and start in 4-line that kept him alive until they reached the medical clinic. That soldier survived and was evacuated to a military hospital in Germany. Before he left, he thanked Monica for saving his life. He told her that he had a little daughter at home who would get to meet her daddy because of what Monica had done. That night, Monica called her parents and told them she finally understood why she had become a soldier. As Monica's deployment continued, the attacks in their area became more frequent. The Taliban were planning something big, but intelligence reports couldn't say exactly what or when it would happen. All the soldiers could do was stay alert and be ready for anything. Monica checked and rechecked her medical supplies. She practiced her emergency procedures until she could do them in her sleep. She didn't know it yet, but everything she had learned was about to be put to the ultimate test. Picture this. You're bleeding out in the middle of a war zone. Bullets are flying overhead. Your squad is pinned down. The enemy is closing in. And the only person who can save you is a 23-year-old woman with a medical bag who weighs barely 120 pounds. That's exactly what happened on a dusty road in Afghanistan when Staff Sergeant Monica Lynn Brown proved that heroes don't always look like what you expect. In just 12 minutes, this Army medic would do something so extraordinary that it would change military history forever. This isn't a movie. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of how one woman became a legend when everything went wrong, and how sometimes the person you least expect to be a warrior turns out to be exactly the warrior you need. Get ready to discover what real courage looks like.